Most people think betrayal happens in a moment. They imagine it begins with a lie, a secret, a broken promise, a signature on a divorce paper, a hidden message, a stolen opportunity, or a knife in the back. But betrayal rarely begins where we notice it. What we call betrayal is often only the final scene of a story that has been unfolding for months, years, sometimes even decades. The act is visible, the process is invisible, and it is the invisible process that deserves our attention. Human beings do not suddenly wake up one morning and decide to destroy trust. Trust erodes before it collapses. Connection weakens before it breaks. Distance grows before anyone notices the gap. Every betrayal has roots, and roots grow underground. You cannot see them. You only see the tree after it has emerged from the soil. The same is true for betrayal. The lie is not the beginning. The secret is not the beginning. The cheating is not the beginning. The abandonment is not the beginning. The beginning is often much quieter. It begins the moment honesty becomes unsafe. It begins when someone no longer feels free to speak what is true. It begins when disappointment is swallowed instead of expressed. It begins when resentment is hidden behind a smile. It begins when fear replaces vulnerability. It begins when people start performing instead of connecting. Because relationships do not break from conflict. They break from the absence of truth. Many people fear arguments. Very few fear silence. Yet silence is often far more dangerous. An argument means something is still alive. An argument means two people are still fighting for understanding. But when people stop speaking honestly, something far more troubling is happening. They are withdrawing their authentic selves from the relationship. And the moment authenticity leaves, betrayal has already begun to build its foundation. Think about how many people spend years saying, "I'm fine," when they are not fine. How many people say, "It doesn't bother me," when it deeply bothers them. How many people say, "Don't worry about it," while carrying wounds that grow heavier every day. Every unspoken truth creates distance. Every hidden resentment builds a wall. Every denied emotion becomes another brick. Eventually the wall becomes so high that neither person can see the other anymore. Then one day the betrayal happens, and everyone acts surprised. But the betrayal was only the visible crack in a structure that had been weakening for a long time. The deepest betrayals often happen between people who once loved each other deeply. That is what makes them so painful. Not because love was absent, but because honesty disappeared. People can survive difficult conversations. They can survive disagreements. They can survive conflict. What they cannot survive indefinitely is emotional dishonesty. The human heart needs truth the way the body needs oxygen. Without it, relationships slowly suffocate. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. Sometimes betrayal begins with a person feeling unseen, not because nobody is looking at them, but because nobody is seeing who they truly are. They begin hiding parts of themselves. They suppress needs. They suppress pain. They suppress anger. They suppress sadness. And whenever a person suppresses their reality long enough, they begin searching for somewhere else to feel alive. Not because they plan to betray, but because they have become strangers to themselves. The tragedy is that many betrayals are not acts of malice. They are acts of disconnection. A disconnected person is capable of doing things their connected self would never do. When people lose connection with their own feelings, values, and humanity, they become capable of choices that shock even them. That is why so many people say, "I don't know why I did it." Because the person who committed the betrayal was operating from a place of disconnection. And disconnection never happens overnight. It develops slowly. One compromise at a time. One unspoken truth at a time. One ignored feeling at a time. One buried wound at a time. The greatest danger is not hatred. The greatest danger is numbness. Because hatred still contains energy. Numbness contains absence. And where there is absence, anything can grow. Resentment grows there. Secrets grow there. Deception grows there. Distance grows there. Betrayal grows there. Many people are waiting for warning signs. But the warning signs are usually not dramatic. The warning sign is the conversation that never happens. The warning sign is the feeling that never gets expressed. The warning sign is the hurt that never gets acknowledged. The warning sign is the truth that never gets spoken. The warning sign is when two people continue sharing a life, but stop sharing themselves. Because relationships are not maintained by proximity. They are maintained by presence. Two people can sleep in the same bed and be miles apart emotionally. Two colleagues can work in the same office and carry years of hidden resentment. Two friends can laugh together while silently drifting apart. Physical closeness cannot compensate for emotional distance. Eventually, reality demands a price. What remains hidden eventually seeks expression. What remains buried eventually seeks air. What remains denied eventually seeks a voice. And when people have not learned to express truth directly, truth often emerges destructively. Not because truth is destructive, because suppression is. A person who feels unheard for years may eventually explode. A person who feels invisible may eventually seek validation elsewhere. A person who feels trapped may eventually run. A person who feels disconnected may eventually cross lines they once swore they would never cross. The betrayal shocks everyone, but the pain that produced it existed long before the act itself. This is why understanding betrayal requires courage, because it forces us to look beneath behavior. Anyone can judge the act. Few people are willing to examine the process. Anyone can condemn the outcome. Few people are willing to understand the suffering, fear, disconnection, and silence that came before it. Understanding does not excuse betrayal, but it reveals something essential. Human beings rarely destroy trust in a single moment. They abandon truth in small moments first. And every time truth is abandoned, trust becomes weaker. Not instantly, but inevitably, the collapse arrives long after the foundation has already cracked. What appears sudden is usually gradual. What appears shocking is usually predictable. What appears like a single event is often the result of countless unseen moments accumulating beneath the surface. That is why the most important question is not, why did the betrayal happen? The deeper question is, when did honesty stop feeling safe? Because that is where the story truly begins. Long before the lie, long before the secret, long before the abandonment, long before the broken promise, long before anyone recognized what was happening. The betrayal had already started growing in the shadows, fed by silence, protected by fear, strengthened by disconnection, and hidden beneath the illusion that everything was fine. I'd make a small correction first. The keynote is *unhealed wounds shape relationships. It was keynote *2 in the earlier list. Here's the expanded section in the same reflective, emotionally powerful style. Every person you meet carries a history you cannot see. Behind every smile is a story. Behind every reaction is a wound. Behind every behavior is an experience that shaped the way they learned to survive. We spend our lives trying to understand what people do. But what people do is rarely the real story. The real story is what happened to them before they ever met us. Many people enter relationships believing they are bringing love. What they do not realize is that they are also bringing every unresolved pain they have ever carried. Every rejection, every abandonment, every humiliation, every betrayal, every moment they felt unwanted, every moment they felt invisible, every moment they learned that being themselves was not enough. The past does not stay in the past simply because time has passed. Pain that is not healed does not disappear. It changes form. It becomes fear. It becomes control. It becomes jealousy. It becomes emotional distance. It becomes anger. It becomes insecurity. It becomes the invisible force shaping relationships from behind the curtain. The most powerful influences in our lives are often the ones we are least aware of. A person who grew up feeling abandoned may desperately crave closeness. Yet the moment someone gets too close, fear awakens. Not because love is dangerous, but because loss feels inevitable. Part of them wants connection. Another part expects abandonment. And so they begin protecting themselves from a pain that has not even happened. A person who was constantly criticized may become highly sensitive to judgment. A simple disagreement feels like rejection. Constructive feedback feels like an attack. A conversation feels like a threat. Not because of what is being said, because of what their nervous system remembers. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The heart remembers what words cannot explain. The wound remains active long after the original event is over. And until it is healed, it continues shaping reality. Many relationships are not actually struggling with the present. They are struggling with the past. Two people sit across from each other believing they are arguing about today's problem. In reality, yesterday's wounds are speaking through today's voices. One person hears criticism where none was intended. Another hears abandonment where none exists. Another hears disrespect where there was only misunderstanding. The conversation happening on the surface is rarely the conversation happening underneath. Because beneath every conflict there is often an old pain asking to be seen, an old fear asking to be soothed, an old wound asking for resolution. The tragedy is that most people do not recognize this. Instead of seeing pain, they see personality. Instead of seeing fear, they see flaws. Instead of seeing wounds, they see weaknesses. And so they judge behavior without understanding its source. But wounded people do not always look wounded. Sometimes they look strong. Sometimes they look successful. Sometimes they look confident. Sometimes they look powerful. Sometimes they become experts at hiding their pain from everyone, including themselves. Yet hidden wounds still influence decisions. They still shape relationships. They still affect the way people love, trust, communicate, and connect. The child who learned that love was conditional often becomes the adult who constantly seeks approval. The child who learned that emotions were dangerous often becomes the adult who struggles with intimacy. The child who learned that vulnerability leads to pain often becomes the adult who keeps everyone at a distance. What begins as adaptation eventually becomes identity. People forget they are surviving. They begin believing that survival strategy is who they are. A wall built for protection becomes a prison. A mask worn for acceptance becomes a burden. A defense mechanism becomes a way of life. And the longer these patterns continue, the harder they are to recognize. Many people believe relationships reveal who we are. In many ways, relationships reveal what remains unhealed within us. Love has a strange way of exposing hidden wounds. Not because love creates pain, because closeness touches places that distance never reaches. The deeper the connection, the greater the possibility that old wounds will surface. That is why some people become terrified when they are loved. Not because they dislike love, because love threatens the protective structures they spent years building. Real intimacy asks us to be seen, and being seen can feel terrifying to someone who learned that visibility leads to hurt. Many people spend years believing their suffering comes from the people around them, but often their deepest battles began long before those people arrived. An unhealed wound can transform a harmless moment into a painful experience. A delayed text message becomes evidence of rejection. A different opinion becomes evidence of disrespect. A moment of distance becomes evidence of abandonment. The present becomes filtered through the lens of the past. Reality becomes distorted by unresolved pain. This is why healing matters. Because without healing, people continue reliving old experiences inside new relationships. Different faces, different names, different circumstances, the same wounds, the same fears, the same emotional patterns, again and again. The pain changes its clothing, but the pain remains. Many people spend years searching for the perfect relationship. What they often need is a deeper relationship with their own wounds. Because no partner can heal pain, they refuse to acknowledge. No friendship can remove fears they refuse to confront. No amount of external love can permanently fill an internal wound that remains unattended. Healing begins the moment a person becomes curious about their pain instead of running from it. The moment they stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to me?" That question changes everything. Because shame says there is something defective inside us. Understanding says there is something wounded inside us. And wounds require compassion, not condemnation. Awareness, not avoidance. Attention, not denial. Every unhealed wound seeks expression. Every unhealed wound seeks recognition. Every unhealed wound seeks resolution. If we do not face our pain consciously, it will emerge unconsciously. It will appear in our reactions. It will appear in our relationships. It will appear in our decisions. It will appear in the way we speak, the way we trust, the way we love, the way we leave, the way we stay. The greatest danger is not having wounds. Every human being has wounds. The greatest danger is allowing wounds to operate in darkness. Because whatever remains hidden gains power. Whatever remains unseen gains control. Whatever remains unhealed continues shaping our lives without our permission. The people who hurt others most deeply are often those who have never learned how to face their own hurt. The people who create chaos are often carrying chaos within themselves. The people who struggle to give love are often those who never fully received it. Pain travels through generations. Pain travels through families. Pain travels through relationships. Until someone becomes aware enough to stop passing it forward. Until someone chooses understanding over blame, awareness over denial, healing over repetition. Because every relationship eventually becomes a mirror. And what we see reflected back is not only who we are, it is also what within us is still asking to be healed. Betrayal has a way of changing everything, not only because of what someone did, but because of what it forces us to see. The pain of betrayal is rarely limited to the event itself. The deepest pain comes from the questions it leaves behind. How did I not see it? Why did this happen? What did I miss? What was real? What was not? And perhaps the most painful question of all, can I ever trust again? Most people believe the greatest loss in betrayal is losing another person, but often the greatest loss is losing trust in ourselves. The moment betrayal is discovered, many people stop questioning the betrayer and start questioning their own judgment. They replay conversations, they revisit memories, they search through the past looking for clues. They examine every detail, every promise, every smile, every moment, trying to understand where everything went wrong. The mind becomes trapped in an endless investigation, searching for certainty, searching for answers, searching for a way to undo what cannot be undone. But there comes a moment when a deeper truth begins to emerge. The purpose of betrayal is not to keep you trapped in the story of the person who hurt you. Its purpose is to bring you back to the story of yourself. Because betrayal has a strange way of revealing where we abandoned our own voice, where we ignored our own instincts, where we silenced our own needs, where we chose comfort over truth, where we accepted less than our heart already knew it deserved. This is not about blame. This is about awareness. The moment betrayal happens, many people become experts on the person who betrayed them. They analyze motives. They analyze behaviors. They analyze personality. They analyze every action. But healing begins when attention returns home. When the question changes from, why did they do this, to what is this experience teaching me about myself? That question opens a different door. A door that leads away from obsession, away from resentment, away from endless rumination, and towards self-discovery. Because every painful experience contains information. Not information about your worth, not information about your value, but information about your relationship with yourself. Many people spend years learning how to trust others. Very few learn how to trust themselves. And yet self-trust is the foundation upon which every healthy relationship is built. Without self-trust, we constantly seek certainty from other people. We seek validation. We seek approval. We seek reassurance. We seek guarantees that no human being can provide. And the more dependent we become on others for our sense of safety, the more vulnerable we become to devastation when they disappoint us. Betrayal exposes this dependence with brutal clarity. It shows us every place where our identity became attached to another person's behavior. Every place where our peace depended on someone else's choices. Every place where our value depended on someone else's loyalty. The pain is immense, but hidden within the pain is an invitation to return to ourselves, to rebuild from the inside out, to create a sense of security that does not collapse when another person fails us. Many people think healing from betrayal means learning how to trust people again. But before that can happen, something more important must occur. They must learn how to trust themselves again. Trusting yourself does not mean believing you will never be hurt. Trusting yourself means believing that if you are hurt, you will be able to face it. Trusting yourself means knowing that your survival does not depend on another person's honesty. Trusting yourself means understanding that even when life breaks your heart, you will not abandon yourself. That is true security. Not certainty, not guarantees, not control. Self-connection. The aftermath of betrayal often feels like standing in the ruins of a life you thought was real. Everything familiar suddenly feels uncertain. Everything stable suddenly feels fragile. Everything trusted suddenly feels questionable. But destruction has a hidden gift. It clears away illusions. It removes what can no longer support growth. It reveals what was built on unstable foundations. And in that painful clearing, something new becomes possible. For the first time, many people begin listening to themselves. Really listening. Not the voice of fear. Not the voice of anger. Not the voice of shame. The deeper voice beneath all of them. The voice that has been quietly speaking for years. The voice that noticed the red flags. The voice that sensed something was wrong. The voice that felt discomfort. The voice that asked questions. The voice that knew. Many people discover after betrayal that they ignored their own wisdom. Not because they were foolish, because they wanted connection, because they wanted hope, because they wanted the relationship to be what they believed it could become. Human beings are remarkably capable of overlooking reality when the alternative feels too painful. We dismiss concerns. We rationalize behavior. We minimize discomfort. We explain away warning signs. Not because we lack intelligence, because we fear loss. And yet betrayal teaches us something profound. Anything we must ignore ourselves to maintain is eventually too expensive to keep. Any relationship that requires self-abandonment comes at a devastating cost. Every time we silence our intuition, we move further away from ourselves. Every time we betray our own truth, we weaken our connection to who we are. This is why self-reconnection becomes the greatest lesson. Not because betrayal is good, not because suffering is desirable, but because pain has a way of exposing what comfort allows us to avoid. When everything falls apart, what remains becomes visible. And often what remains is the relationship we have with ourselves. That relationship determines everything, whether we rise or remain stuck, whether we grow or remain bitter, whether we heal or remain imprisoned by the past. The people who emerge strongest from betrayal are not necessarily the people who receive apologies, not necessarily the people who get closure, not necessarily the people who receive justice. They are the people who return to themselves, the people who stop searching for answers in the person who hurt them, the people who stop waiting for understanding from someone incapable of providing it, the people who stop handing their healing over to another human being and begin reclaiming ownership of their own lives. There is extraordinary power in reaching the moment where your recovery no longer depends on the actions of the person who betrayed you, where your peace no longer requires their explanation, where your happiness no longer requires their regret, where your future no longer requires their participation, because freedom begins there, not when the past changes, not when they change, when you change your relationship to yourself, when you become someone who listens to your inner voice, someone who honors your boundaries, someone who respects your needs, someone who trusts your perceptions, someone who remains loyal to yourself even when others are not. The deepest wound of betrayal is not that someone else broke your trust. The deepest wound is the fear that you can never feel safe again. And the deepest healing comes when you discover that safety was never meant to come entirely from another person. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you will stay connected to yourself, that you will listen to yourself, protect yourself, respect yourself, value yourself, stand beside yourself, even in the darkest moments, especially in the darkest moments, because when betrayal strips away every illusion, every expectation, every false certainty, it leaves behind one essential question. Will you abandon yourself the way someone else abandoned you? Or will this be the moment you finally come home to who you truly are?